titled as Radiant Fugitives. The discussion will be about Nawaaz Ahmed's debut novel. Before turning to writing, he was computer scientist researching search algorithms. Radiant Fugitives was longlisted for the Center of Fiction First Novel Prize and the Aspen's World's Literary Prize. And he will be in conversation with Bangalore-based author Andaleeb Wajid. Over to you, Andaleeb.
Good evening. Thank you everyone for being here with me and Nawaaz as we talk about his novel Radiant Fugitives. I'm sure if you Google for this book or for Nawaaz, you will come across epithets like brilliant and minutely observed and critically acclaimed, which are all very richly deserved. This novel is, it's so richly layered, and Nawaaz and I had a very interesting and upbeat conversation in the author lounge, which is very different from the, it doesn't really match with the book, but we'll try to keep you folks interested and entertained. Nawaaz, welcome. Welcome to Bangalore, welcome to BLF. My first question is, would you like to tell us a little bit about why this book is called Radiant Fugitives?
Okay, thanks, Andaleeb. This is actually such a pleasure to be here because this is my first book, and this is actually my first presence outside and where I'm in public. So I'm really thrilled to be here and to see all these faces. And thank you for your very kind words about the book. The title Radiant Fugitives was not the title that I started with. The book had a different title, and for 9 years of the writing of it, it was different. My editor chose this title. He said that the book I'd written deserved a richer title than what I was given. Maybe I had just, you have a sense of, of not thinking of the book as something larger than what it was. And I think there was this, when you're working on a book, it always feels like this is what you're working on. And then suddenly when you finish the book, and you begin to see that there are things that you put into it that are not, that were there all along. And Radiant Fugitives, I think, comes from the sense, it's actually a phrase in the book, and it comes out very much at the end of the book. And it's a question of two different versions of what fugitive and radiance mean. Like fugitives as in things that are people who are fleeing from something, and fugitive as in something that is transitional, something that is just ephemeral. And so that we have both those senses of the word fugitives. And the characters in this book, I think, are fleeing towards something that, like light. And there is this search for light in our lives. And that's where the radiance comes from. So these radiant fugitives are characters, I hope, like all of us, I think, who are seeking lives, some sense of light in our lives, and may have to, and that light could be ephemeral, but we still have to seek it and move towards it. And that's the journey of the book.
Thank you. I mean, after reading the book and listening to this explanation, I feel like I have to read the book again now. So so when I first got to know that I'll be talking to Nawaaz, I Googled him and the book, and then I got to know that the narrator is an unborn baby. So I was like, oh God, this sounds like some sort of technically clever thing to do. But to Nawaaz's credit, the moment you start reading the book and you're introduced to the narrator, it does not feel like some sort of tweeting to do, or some sort of trying to show off your technical writing. I mean, not technical, but your writing skills. So, was there any reason why you chose this unborn baby Ishraq as the narrator?
Okay. Can I actually read from
the
beginning?
Please,
so that
please.
we get a sense of what that
absolutely.
voice is? As Andaleeb says, the book does start off on a very striking note. And with the baby narrator. He's not actually unborn. He's
just
newly
born,
born,
yes.
just newly born.
Yes.
And this is what he says on the very first line. My life outside my mother's womb has just begun. But what a beginning. I'm bathed in a harsh light, buffeted by jarring noises from all directions, and besieged by cold hands and instruments that prod and squeeze. Doctors and nurses circle me. They apply suction to clear my airways of fluid and pump air into me to trigger my breathing. But my lungs have so far refused to cooperate. Consider this. I've spent 9 months cradled in my mother's body. During that time, I was mostly asleep, suspended in a warm amniotic sea, my head and body and limbs secure. I was soothed by the regularity of my mother's heartbeats. My world was small and safe and familiar, interrupted only occasionally by lights and sounds from the outside. And even those arrived muted by my mother's flesh and bone, the light tinted by her blood. I knew my mother's voice and little else. Yet, I'm now expected to welcome a world I know little about, wrenched from my mother's embrace. A mother who's already dead. Her heart no longer pumps what little blood remains in her body, lying splayed on the operating table. Beside her, a doctor is furiously trying to revive her, his hands massaging her heart via the 6-inch incision in her abdomen through which I was lifted out just a minute ago. I'll stop there.
Yeah. So, you start off like this and you've already told us that the mother is dead. So there is a sort of dread that builds on, as the book goes along, because somewhere at the back of your mind, it's always playing that, this Seema didn't survive this. Of course, it's all very sad, and we will come back to the sad part later. But I want to ask you. I want to tell the audience who probably haven't read the book yet, and which is available downstairs, I'm sure. So please buy it and get it signed. So the story is about 3 women. Seema, the protagonist's mother. Okay, she's a protagonist actually, and her sister and her mother. And it takes place over a span of 5 days, where her sister and mother have come to assist her in her delivery. And so much happens, back and forth. And the book is divided into 4 parts, right?
And 3 main parts in a prelude and a coda. So
as a reader, I could identify with the parts of the familiar, the parts that dealt with the family, which is so, I don't know, I feel like whatever words I say are inconsequential, because you need to read it to understand how minutely observant this whole narrative is, the relationship dynamic between the siblings, between each sibling and the mother. And of course, their very distant father who has cut off ties with Seema because she came out as a lesbian. And, so for whatever reason, so it's the dynamics, the family within family is something that I'm sure you've been asked about a lot. So would you like to talk about that, Nawaaz? Tell us about this family within the family where, 2 people in a family of 4, there are 2 families already.
Yes. Just before that, let me also mention a little bit about why I felt the need to have the baby narrator in the book.
Yes,
and
please.
I think that's tied, in fact, to this family within the family thing that you're talking about. As Andaleeb has said, I was writing about this very divided family where we had these characters who had these great rifts that had developed between them, that then they had grown apart. And in order to write about these people who can view each other quite in quite prejudiced eyes, and there may be some anger, some resentment, some betrayal, there's all this baggage that we carry from in our families. I think in lots of families, there's this relationship that we both love and hate at the same time, or love to hate or hate to love. in order to be able to talk about these people, I felt I needed somebody who could accept these characters for who they were. The characters themselves are not going to do that. Seema and her sister and her mother have this baggage and these views already that have been created over this lifetime. And I needed someone I felt who would be able to see them with new eyes, eyes that would be accepting and not judging them all the time like the characters themselves. I think at least I tend to judge the ones I love the most, I judge the most because I know them the most. And I felt like I needed somebody who would not do that. And that's why I thought an innocent baby who's just coming in and who already has this burden of knowing that his mother is dead is going to have to try to figure out, like a detective almost, what happened. And I think that's where the minute observation and all the rest comes. He is, in a sense, a detective. This is, I would say, I grew up reading detective novels, and it becomes like a sense, not a whodunit, but almost a why done it and a how done it. What really happened in those 5 days? And the baby, in a sense, is this investigator trying to lay out all the factors that went into that.
So, so the baby is this omniscient narrator sort of thing who can go back and forth. And, of course, it's, the creative liberties and all that. So the whole situation with the family and especially, I think the father who doesn't really come across much, who is this phenomenon of a man himself and, whose approval both the daughters are seeking either, knowingly or unknowingly. And it kind of, a lot of whatever they are kind of comes from this approval that they're trying to seek, So you didn't answer that part about the family within the family thing, do you want to talk about that? I mean, there's not really, I mean, I think everyone knows within, your family, you probably get along better with your mother or your father. And, there's like factions within the family, which has been brought about really, really well in this book. And, there are moments where you can recognize like, oh, I can see this happening. I can see this playing out, that sort of a thing.
Yeah. And the kind of things with this, the family within the family thing is also the sense of sometimes these boundaries also shift. Like at some point you may feel closer to one person than the other. And in the book, I think Seema and their father Naimullah are like larger than life characters. They tend to take over the space. They are performative in various ways, and they also take glory in that kind of performance. And the mother and the younger sister are somewhat in the shadows. And so we have like two factions, the father and the elder daughter, and the mother and the younger daughter, in a sense, trying to find a ballast against the other family within the family. And of course, when Seema is excommunicated by the father, that kind of thing breaks apart. The dynamics that has been there kind of breaks apart, but it's always there. And during these 5 days, you again begin to see how it comes back and creates the kind of tensions.
There's a lot to unpack in this book, which I don't think this half an hour is going to be enough, because this isn't just about families. So as I was telling Nawaaz earlier, he's divided his book into four parts. The second part deals with the baby's father, who is a Black American, and there's a lot of politics, which kind of takes you out of this familial atmosphere and puts you into the Obama era days when Seema meets Bill, and why they get married, and why they separate. So tell us a little bit about your reasons for including a political, a very strong, again, minutely observed political angle to this book. Like, what was the reason, for what seemed like a family story suddenly is thrust? Of course, from the beginning, we know that Seema is involved in politics, But this entire section, talks a lot about Seema's reaction to America's politics. So what was the reason to bring that into this book?
I think when I started the book, and this was a long time ago, it was like 2010, and Obama had, and I was living, and I am still living in the US. 2008 was when Obama was elected, and there was so much hope. And within a couple of years, we saw that hope started disintegrating. And then there was this huge backlash against Obama that happened in the US. And what that brought to my mind was how our lives in the US, and I think even now in India, how our lives are to a large extent becoming very dictated by the politics of what is happening in the country. I, as a Muslim, as a queer Muslim, found kind of in the receiving end of two different kind of culture wars that were going on. In 2008, there was this huge backlash against the mosque that was being built in New York. And so there was these attacks that were happening. There was also same-sex marriage battle that was going on. So I think as people on the margins of a country, politics of what's happening in the country begins to color our lives, and there's no way of evading that. And I felt like if I were to write about Seema, who is a lesbian and who is a Muslim lesbian, and her family, that there was really no way of talking about how their lives unfold without also talking about what is happening in the country around them. And I felt like our lives are dictated a whole lot by the things happening in the country. And I really wanted to be able to express the full set of forces that act upon us, not just the forces within the family, not just the social forces, but also the political forces. And I felt like I couldn't leave that out. That was definitely part of the world we live in, and it seems to become more and more part of the world we are living in.
Okay, so, when I started reading the book, and as I was reading it, I kept thinking, this was before I read the part where Seema plays Anarchy and in her school play. And I was thinking Seema is like the sun and everyone is just revolving around her. And then there is an, you allude to that later on where, she's dressed as Anarchy, and there is, I think Salim says those words, something, you are the sun or something like that. But at the same time, despite Seema being the central protagonist, so I think different people are going to take away different things from this book. And, some of the things that we discussed earlier in the library is your treatment of her sister, Tahira, who is a very different, who's the other extreme, extreme is an extreme word, but who's the other end, where Seema is, she's all this, and she's, and she's this former lesbian or lesbian, and she's married, she's having a baby, and she's not particularly, following her faith or anything. And Tahira, on the other hand, is the other end of that, where, so I felt that, do you want to talk about how you came about Tahira's character as, as someone who is very rigid, also very bitter, but at the same time, as as a Muslim woman who also practices my faith, I want to ask, why is this written in this way that it makes one feel like, is there anything wrong with the way she is doing things? So do you want to talk about that?
I mean, that's a very important question, and I had to deal with my own feelings of religion while writing this book. The idea about the way Tahira came across, I mean, she is a journey. All the characters in my book have gone through journeys. Like Seema started out is a lesbian, but she also gets married. And then there is this whole reason, this journey of how she becomes that. And Tahara too starts off pretty from a different end. They grow up reading romantic poets, and they're not particularly observant Muslims at the beginning, but Tahara finds her journey towards religion. And what I really was looking at is like, what are the various ways in which we are seeking to find meaning in our lives? And Tahara's way, because of various forces that have acted on her, is to find meaning in religion. And her family seeks in various ways to find that kind of purpose in their life. And when we do that in the US and in India and all the other places, there is this secular branch of the public who do look down upon that. As you say, definitely.
Got only 5 minutes and I haven't even, sorry, continue.
Who do look down upon that. And I wanted to explore that, like, what does that mean? And why are these divisions there? Why do we look down upon it? And isn't that the same prejudices and divisions that actually cause further rifts? And how do we bridge that? So yes.
Okay, so I don't want to leave the audience. I want to give them a chance to ask Nawaaz any questions. I had so many more questions to ask him. We want to talk about the food in the book and why is literary fiction always so sad? So I'm sure he doesn't have the answers for that, but it's please feel free to ask questions if you have about the book or anything else. No one's asking means we can continue. Okay. So Nawaaz, okay, what was I going to say? Yeah, so why is it so sad? Why is literary fiction so sad? I won't say you will get depressed after reading this book, but you will definitely feel all your feelings. So
I have a mentor who says that the purpose of writing that he does, why he writes, is to break your heart. And there are various reasons to write, and one is to entertain, one is to illuminate. And I think breaking somebody's heart is a good reason to write, in the sense that from that place of a broken heart, maybe, and this comes from back to the title of Radiant Fugitives, maybe we can build back something. And I think maybe you have to break something first to build. And that's the reason why Radiant Fugitives tries to break your heart, at least.
Of course it does. It's heartbreakingly beautiful and a book that you must read. I write popular fiction, so I also read a lot of popular fiction. So this book was a change from that, and I'm really happy I got to read it and meet Nawaaz and talk about all this and more. I think we had a lot of discussion already. Do you have a question? Yeah.
You said that you took around 9 years to write the book, right? I want to ask you how you grew as a person while writing it for 9 years.
Definitely, I changed as much as the book changed. The book went through various drafts. And I think at each draft, what came to me is, at the end of each draft, you see what you've left. What are the flaws in the book that are left? And then you begin to ask yourself why. For example, with Tahara, for example, you begin to ask yourself, like, why is there so much bitterness against her? Or am I in any way doing what these characters are doing to each other? And so as I kept digging into that, I think I definitely grew to a place where each of these characters became parts of me. Tahara and Seema are all, I think now, they're not these characters who's one extreme or the other. They are all parts of me. And I think the journey of 9 years took me to realize that these prejudices, these divisions are all like within me. I don't want to appear schizophrenic, but I think that
all writers, I'm not making light of it, but to some extent, it's part of who we are, So.
Yes. So that's the discovery that these divisions are within me is what I think took those 9 years.
So do we still have a little time? Because I have another question I want to ask. Do we have some time? Okay, great. So anyone in the audience? Any questions? Okay, so why John Keats of all the romantic poets? There's a lot of Keats in the book.
I mean, we grew up reading Keats. That's one reason. I think in my initial conception of the book, there was just going to be all the romantic poets. But in the writing of it, I had to pick one. And I think John Keats, there's also, apart from the fact that some of his, the beautiful poetry, there's the fact that he also died very young. And
the tragedy of
there's the tragedy of Keats and the tragedy in which he himself is seeking light. And so I think Keats himself I see as one of the radiant fugitives that
he makes an appearance in the end, right?
he does.
Yes.
He does.
Okay, so that's all we have time for. And Nawaaz is here. I think he is in another session and his book is available downstairs. Thank you so much. And I hope you all read his book. Thank you.
Thank you all.